Welcome to the On the Slate movie podcast. I'm Wesley.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Asher.
And on the slate for today, we are deep diving one of the most beloved movie franchises of all time, The Lord of the Rings. Hit it, Asher. The Lord of the Rings trilogy was released between the years of 2001 and 2003. Each movie was a year apart, those films being titled The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, just like J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote these books back in the 50s?
Yeah, Fellowship came out in 56, I think.
And those actually succeeded The Hobbit, which was the first book, which he wrote many years before that. So... Yeah, these movies are often thought as some of the most beloved movies. I think a lot of my friends and a lot of people that I follow on, that I trust their opinions always say Lord of the Rings is one of their favorite movies of all time. So yeah, there's a lot of love behind it. We're going to talk about all of it today, and we're going to try to not stay up all night doing this, but maybe we will. Who knows? This is episode 7, by the way.
I brought my sleeping bag if we did.
You live here.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So why don't we just give a quick summary of the trilogy, which
do it.
My friend Mr. Wikipedia wrote for us.
Very nice of him, by the way.
Yeah, I love that guy. Set in the fictional world of Middle-earth, the films follow the hobbit Frodo Baggins as he and the Fellowship of the Ring embark on a quest to destroy the One Ring and to defeat its maker, the Dark Lord Sauron. Ooh. The Fellowship eventually splits up, and Frodo continues the quest with his loyal companion Sam and, eventually, the treacherous Gollum. Meanwhile, Aragorn, heir in exile to the throne of Gondor, along with the elf Legolas, the dwarf Gimli, the hobbits Merry Pippin, the human Boromir, and the wizard Gandalf unite to save the free peoples of Middle-earth from the forces of Sauron and rally them in the War of the Ring to aid Frodo by distracting Sauron's attention. How did I do?
Wonderful.
You can read. Boy,
Amazing.
Can you read.
What a jam-packed trilogy.
A jam-packed trilogy. We have a lot to talk about. So, my lovely friend ChatGPT organized this agenda for us. Love that guy. Wikipedia and ChatGPT are two.
I love Wiki and Chat.
Just because, we can't do this all ourselves. Organization, never heard of it. Anyway, the principal character of this movie, maybe I don't know if there's a main character, but the closest thing would probably be Frodo Baggins, played by Elijah Wood, and that's definitely his most recognized performance of his career.
Yeah.
His first movie ever. So
Really? Was it his first movie?
I think so.
Wow.
Or one of his first. Yeah.
You can check.
But yeah, he's kind of the center of this. He's a he's a hobbit. Hobbits, obviously are short, I guess they look like men, but they're short. They have big feet. They have big feet. They're not like dwarves where they're stocky.
Right.
But
and
they're
just shorter.
They're just short.
Yeah. They're and they're proportionally smaller too.
Yeah. But they just chilling in the Shire, this, green place with their nature all around them. And they like to smoke various weeds. It's not called marijuana. Explicit content warning.
To me, it looks more like tobacco.
But,
if you look at the leaves, they look like tobacco.
Well, it kind of makes them a little bit high when they smoke it. But anyway, they're just kind of these chill people that don't really go on adventures. But Frodo is kind of forced into this, and this isn't the Hobbit podcast, but there's his uncle Bilbo gets the One Ring in the Hobbit and then passes it on to his nephew Frodo, who now has to destroy it. So, yeah, what do you guys think of Frodo, the character?
Frodo, I think, is pretty awesome. And the way he kind of contrasts a little bit with Samwise also throughout the 3 films. But you really do see it is like subtle. And I know it's like 9+ hours of movie, but it is subtle how he goes from where he starts at the very beginning of the Fellowship and where he is at the end of Return of the King. And it's, the makeup obviously changes too. He looks more tired, he looks more ragged. But his performance, man. Elijah Wood, I don't like since these movies have come out, I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything where I thought, wow, he's really putting in a super great like performance. But in these, like, rewatching them here now, and I'm like, I don't know if did he ever get nominated for Oscars for this?
I don't know. He didn't. The only acting nomination that Lord of the Rings got was Ian McKellen for the first movie.
Not even Andy Serkis?
No, there actually
We'll
was a
get to
big
that,
campaign for Andy Serkis as Gollum for the second one, but he was ineligible because he was like an animated character.
Wow.
He was ineligible for
we love
supporting
the
actors.
We love the
Wow.
Oscars.
So
That's all I have to say to that is wow.
But
It's still acting.
I agree. I mean, but
Andy Serkis should get a lot of, maybe it starts with this, but like he's done a ton of work since
He
then
has. Yeah. For me, Frodo, I think it's really honorable that he chose to carry the ring, and you can definitely see that throughout the movies. The one thing I don't like though is, and I think I kind of caught onto this when I was younger too, he just kind of seems whiny sometimes to me, and I don't like that. Like, especially for being a lead character, there were just moments where I'm like, dude, stop whining.
Elaborate a little bit for me. Like, what do you like? What particular scene comes to mind? I guess.
Well, it's not just one scene, but so kind of compare him to Sam, and like the way Sam, in a sense, sometimes just rallies himself up to just keep going. On the other hand, I know that Frodo is carrying this ring, which is an actual physical, mental, everything burden on him, and so I'm wondering if that's why his characteristics are kind of leaning towards whiny, as like that's what I'm kind of perceiving it as. But there are just moments in the film where the way he goes about a situation, like his response is kind of just annoying. Like it's almost kind of like what you wouldn't expect a lead hero character to do, which might be exactly what they were trying to say, but I think just the way he was kind of even sometimes dragging his feet and always like falling down, and it seemed like he was causing a lot of issues along the way, and sometimes it just didn't make me like his character. But at the same time, maybe this is all pointing back to how burdensome his task was. So yeah
I think a lot of it, they're just emphasizing how much the ring sucks your soul.
Yeah.
And like makes you tired. Like they don't do it as much in Return of the King, but in the Two Towers, they do it in some in the Return of the King. But they emphasize how he's not sleeping at all. Like he doesn't really go to sleep. So for a lot of this, at least during the last leg of their journey, Frodo's like hasn't slept more than a couple hours at a time, it seems.
Yeah.
Too. So
That's a really good point.
yeah, I think it's this whole idea of like his character versus like the influence of the ring on him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, that is an interesting thing. And I think a big part of why he is like Gandalf, like sends him on this mission, right, is I think Gandalf does like trust Frodo, like, because in the first few scenes of the Fellowship of the Ring, he's, saying, what must I do? Like he seems eager to like be able to get rid of this evil. Like he seems like there's that innate like bravery in him. But yeah, I agree. There's also like flaws to his character. Like I think he, I don't know. He does he seems like he's a hobbit. Like he's reluctant to like go on this adventure in other ways too. So, and maybe he just feels like he's not the right guy. And he even offers it to like Gandalf and says like, why don't you take it? But I don't know. There's something like about a hobbit that's harmless, you know, that like if they get corrupted, it's not like they have these grand magical powers that could like destroy the world, you know. He's just a hobbit, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's like what's on the inside that grows, and yeah. So
they're also like harder to corrupt, or at least Frodo's harder to corrupt. I mean, we see with Smeagol and his flashback how he turned instantly, you know?
Yeah.
And even Samwise had a hard time giving Frodo back the ring. Like he resisted for a second there. And obviously he gave it back. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, when you rewatch like The Fellowship, Frodo's able to put down the ring and let other people touch it pretty freely. And without any real hesitation until more toward the end of that movie. And that's after spending months with it. Or weeks, depending on where you are. Yeah. So clearly something about Frodo's character, he's just, you know, there's a lot of themes about fate or something, but
yeah,
we'll get there when we get there.
Good point.
So another major character in this trilogy is Aragorn. I think he's my favorite character. I just think he's cool. He's that typical like hero. Like he's, you know, he's always, you know, he's like this king that, you know, has abandoned his like destiny as the king of Gondor. Like he's walked away from that just to like wander in the wilderness and do ranger things.
Yeah.
You know, and spend a lot of time with the elves, you know, and that plays into like his romance with Arwen, Liv Tyler's character. Yeah, and I think just for me, like he's like a determined, like kind person. I think that is heroic. You know, he's like a really easy character to like. He's really good at killing bad guys. Like that scene in Fellowship of the Ring where he's like on the, like, I don't know, the ruins or whatever. And like all these orcs are coming after him. He's like just, it's
in
one versus 100.
The one in the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like killing all of them.
You know in that scene when, did I cut you off, Wesley?
No, you're
okay.
Good.
So you know in that same scene, you know the part where he hits the arrow flying at him with his sword.
Yeah.
So that wasn't planned. Like that just happened.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah.
I remember seeing that, like the most recent rewatch. I was like, I just thought, like, that's unrealistic. Like, you know, it's like,
it was cool though.
It was cool. I wasn't like nitpicking or anything. I was like, I feel like I couldn't. I feel like a normal person couldn't do that.
Well,
clearly, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like watching his journey as he, and you know, eventually, and the Return of the King. Like that's the film was titled after him, right? Like the Return of the King to Gondor, to, you know, unite all the people of the Middle Earth, you know, to like Rohan and all of these different places where they're lighting the beacons. Yeah, I just really appreciated like how that all came together for him, and like how he realized his destiny. He abandoned, like the Elrond said, abandon the ranger and be who you were born to be, you know, and he finally does that. And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, he realized the responsibility of that was greater than his like own personal interest in like not wanting to be the king or, you know, whatever. So,
yeah.
I think there's a good argument for Aragorn being the main character of the trilogy. And obviously you don't actually meet him until maybe like a quarter of the way through the Fellowship. But a lot of the emotional, like, I mean, it's split. It's a pretty like 50-50 share, I guess, maybe between Frodo
and Aragorn.
But I mean, you know, on a good day, you could probably convince me that Aragorn is the main character, because a lot of this follows his story.
Yeah, because he's introduced in the tavern, right? And he's sitting back there in the corner,
chilling.
Yeah, chilling. Yeah, I think
being all brooding and mysterious.
I think it's almost like his storyline and his influence of being, you know, a lead character combatant to Frodo. I think it continues to snowball for him. Like, he's introduced kind of subtly. He still makes an impact though, and then like his character just continues to gain more of traction throughout the story, and like his character gains more of an importance as we go along, and then like in the ending he has humongous substantial importance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think it's cool that, like, obviously we know pretty early on that he's the heir to the throne for Gondor, but particularly in the Two Towers, he gains the trust of the people of Rohan. I mean, yes, like from his name too, but also like they really begin to trust him after they battle with him a couple of times. I think they emphasize that all the way through Return of the King, where they're like, they need you here because he's about to go like walk down a path. There's like, they need you here because they believe in you.
Yeah.
Not because he's like the heir to Gondor, but because he's like fought with them.
Yeah.
For like seemingly weeks at this point.
Yeah. Which makes his coronation like that much sweeter, because he's truly a king inside and out, you know, fighting on the front lines with his people, which is, I think, a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think Gandalf is the next character to go over. And yeah, I mean, he's that typical like fantasy character of the wise old mentor, right? That helps the, you know, younger protagonist on, you know, his way to like realizing his destiny. And Gandalf is, yeah, he's just like a pillar of the fellowship over the course of this trilogy. He's with a lot of different characters at a lot of different times. Yeah, and I think Ian McKellen, I think, I mean, he has like I don't know, I think he gives like the best performance throughout the trilogy, in my opinion. And not that the others are bad by any means, but I think his stood out the most, just like a classically trained elderly man acting in this role. It's so perfect. And like how he sounds like, oh, I'm an intelligent British man. But also just like his heroism, especially in the Return of the King, where you see him like leading. He's basically trying to rally these people, you know, because the steward king of Gondor is like the worst king ever. You know, he's completely abandoning his responsibility and has given up all hope, and is also probably like mentally like not all there.
Yeah.
Insane.
You know,
He ain't there.
So, you know, he becomes like a symbol of hope for pretty much everybody. You know, he's always there. He's never like the main guy. Like he never allows himself to take over, but he always is like helping others realize their destinies, you know?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, really meaningful. And I mean, I think definitely deserved that supporting actor nomination, and should have probably got nominated for the third one. Definitely. Like, you know, he gives some like all time great speeches. Like when he's talking to, Pippin about like death is not the end. And
Yeah.
The White Shores.
yeah, I don't know, but it's just like the whole movie. Like,
Yeah.
I think you can tell he really loved the Lord of the Rings, like the novels, you know, and I think that was like his career role for him.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think even with his background of acting, like, you know, the type of world he comes from, I think that served its purpose with this type of role, you know, because the dialogue isn't technically, you know, like a modern movie in terms of its dialogue, but there's a lot of rich qualities in the lines, and I think it gave way for him to bring a lot of that experience and that background of his into, you know, his portrayal and his deliverances as well.
And I think you can see why like he's probably the most iconic character from the trilogy as far as like popular culture is concerned. I mean, yes, somebody, You see somebody with a big white beard, you call him Gandalf.
Yeah, or Santa. But
Or Santa. But if they have a robe on particularly, then it's definitely a Gandalf.
a white or gray robe.
Yeah.
And you could just see like how many times like that trope. I mean, I'm not saying J.R.R. Tolkien invented that kind of like wise wizard mentor, but you can tell like even stuff like Harry Potter, like how much Dumbledore like is influenced by Gandalf. You know, he's a very influential character in like our modern literary, works.
Yeah.
And how refreshing is it to have characters who are just like genuinely good, like all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And Gandalf particularly, yeah, but I guess it goes for the rest of the cast too, but or most of the protagonists at least, where it's just like they're not trying to introduce some morally gray, oh well, Gandalf is good, but he's sometimes he's bad. It's like, no, Gandalf is he's really good.
Yeah.
He does the right thing.
Yeah.
Most of the time, all the time, and if he does the wrong thing, it's not on purpose.
Yeah. And he's the type of guy to call himself out on it,
Right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like my mind relaxes watching his performance.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And maybe a lot of people's picks for like favorite character would be Samwise Gamgee. I mean, this guy is like at the beginning. I remember when I watched these movies for the first time. I'd never read the books before I watched them. I mean, but I was a kid when I watched them for the first time. Like when I watched the first movie or two, I was like, Sam's not really my favorite character, but in the third movie, like, holy cow, Samwise Gamgee is the hero.
What a baller.
Like the Middle Earth is not saved without Samwise Gamgee. And for him to just like the word loyalty sticks out to me with him. Loyal to Sam or to Frodo. All the way to the end. Even after Frodo tells him to go home because Gollum tricked him. I really appreciate loyalty like as a trait, in general. Like I think of myself as a loyal person as well, so I think characters like this I can really relate to. He
is, man. And what's cool about that loyalty is when Frodo does just disregard him in Return of the King, tells him to go home, like that makes it so much more of an impact. Like it feels like you're just getting cut. Like, no, like this is awful, and you can see that in Sam's performance or Sean's performance as Sam. And it's like he feels that. And even at the end when Frodo is about to drop the ring, into the lava, he then turns around and is like, the ring is mine. And like Sam is still, he still wants to see the good in Frodo come forth. And even then, you can still see loyalty in that moment, it just shows his character.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sam is pretty awesome. I guess it's like one of those, he's a very unique character. You don't see anything quite like that in other properties or other media. Where, I mean, you see tons of sidekick characters, but do you see one who's really like kind of the hero themselves too?
Yeah.
I'd say not really.
And he doesn't call it to himself either. Like he's not trying to call attention to himself. He's here for Frodo. Like he even calls Frodo Mr. Frodo. Like that just shows you how much respect he has for him.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, everything he does is just like, dude, MVP. Like him fighting the spider, him going up the orc tower, killing the last orc, all these things, carrying Frodo up the mountain or up the volcano. It's like, yeah.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you.
Dude,
bro, everybody's
so
on their seat, on their feet clapping. Yeah. Oh, man. But what I think is the most well-written character in this trilogy, and also maybe one of my favorite and most interesting movie characters ever, is probably Gollum. There's so much to him that is like, there's just a lot to talk about with Gollum.
Yeah.
Like he is this like tragic kind of hero turned villain, that you never really know until the end, like if the Gollum part of him or like the Smeagol part of him is going to win out. And yeah, some of those like scenes, there's one in the Two Towers in particular where, you know, they're like, he's like looking in like a reflective like water surface or something. So it looks like both of them are talking to each other, which is really great filmmaking in my like, but you know, just the way that's directed, that whole scene.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, Andy Serkis, like putting on the mocap suit. This was like one of the first like fully like mocapped characters in movies. There was like one of the pioneers of that. And
Yeah.
like,
It was a milestone.
yeah, Andy Serkis killed it. Like did so good as Gollum. And also, yeah, he even played Smeagol in live action. So he did get a non-Gollum, you know, at the first scene of the third movie. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I just think it's very interesting, like how he represents like this bigger theme of like light versus dark that's so common in fantasy, and especially like the Lord of the Rings, you know. And he's like, this character is like the embodiment of that, and also, you know, duality, you know, that kind of stuff. And he's like the example of like how the ring can corrupt somebody. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, well, we don't want Frodo to become like Gollum, right? But I think he's a necessary character in seeing like the actual effects of what the ring can do to somebody.
Yeah.
So I really did appreciate that. Also in the Hobbit movie, I don't love those movies, but the first movie, there's a scene with him and Bilbo exchanging riddles that I really love. But that's an
good scene.
aside there. But
That is a good scene.
Gollum I think is maybe my favorite movie character ever. So
Yeah. It's funny how, and I think this just goes into the performance and the writing of Gollum. It's crazy and funny how in certain moments you can almost like him because of the way he'll deliver his lines or like the way he acts. It's like, oh, like this is just a kid, you know, sometimes. And it's almost like, yeah, I like him, you know, he's growing on me. And then, you know, 5 seconds later, he's not the same person, you know, and it's like, I want to be as far away as possible from this thing, you know, this demented, twisted hobbit, you know. And so it's, yeah. When you were talking about him looking in the water, it also reminded me of the scene where it might be where they first introduce him talking to himself, like Gollum and Smeagol talking to each other, where like the camera rotates around him to show the other side of his face as the other part of him talks. And I thought that was such a very cool visual way of distinguishing the two and like kind of saying, hey, this is the internal conflict he's living with right now, without even saying anything, like visually representing that, I thought was chef's kiss.
Yeah, I think that scene takes place, it's either at the end of The Two Towers or the start of Return of the King.
I didn't see it in Return of the King.
So then it's the end of The Two Towers.
Okay.
Because it's where he decides, like, no. That's where he's, like, struggling to, like, it's where he, like, decides that he's not going to give in to Gollum. Because he tells him to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so...
In the second movie, you think he's like making a turn for the better, but then in Return of the King, you see that scene where Gollum ends up winning out in the end.
Well,
in
so...
his mind. And like the obsession of the ring wins out, and he becomes that villain really that's that's trying to most actively stop Frodo and Sam from destroying the ring. And I think that's really interesting how it's not even like Sauron that's doing that. I mean, he obviously wants them to stop, but it's like another villain that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's, in The Two Towers, Smeagol decides to tell Gollum to go away. Mm-hmm. But then they get caught by Faramir, who then beats and tortures Gollum, or Smeagol, and kind of makes him lose trust in Frodo. And it's right after that where Smeagol re-invites Gollum back in, and they decide that they're going to kill him.
And a lot of that has to do also with Sam and his like skepticism and like, rightfully so, like able to discern like, hey, Gollum is not a guy that's actually good. Like he even tells Frodo's like, you have to understand like this guy is a villain.
Yeah.
But Frodo has had wisdom too, and it's like, but we also need a guide. So like I'm gonna try to bring the best like Smeagol parts out of him, so we can get to where we need to go. And I think also Frodo did care about like his redemption as a character, but it was one of those tragic things where like inside of Gollum, like the bad part went out in the end.
Well, I just think it's also really interesting that like it wasn't like his own. It wasn't like, oh, he just decided to like give in. He was like kind of forced or pushed to that. Now, I'm not saying just because you get beat up means you get to betray people.
Yeah.
But but you can see why, like, because the way he gets captured is Frodo denies knowing who Gollum is right away.
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, well, yeah. And then so it looks like to Smeagol / Gollum that Frodo betrayed him, because now he's in a room with Faramir's men and they beat him. And then the entire time Sam's hated him and he still hates him. And, you know, and a really subtle thing is that he always calls him Sam always referred to him as Gollum, where Frodo would refer to him as Smeagol.
I didn't catch that.
And I think only near the end that Samwise does like call him Smeagol once, but like throughout the Two Towers and Return of the King, he really calls him Gollum.
Yeah.
And you know, that's just one of those things where it's like his environment isn't, he's shaped by like the environment. It's just really good writing.
Yeah. And I heard this from someone else before we move on. I thought what they said, I thought was really interesting, that basically Gollum's ultimate downfall towards the end led to like mankind's victory and all elf kind and everyone else. Like his decision to lean into the Gollum tendencies led to the destruction of the ring, which is like I think a really clever way of writing that. Yeah,
and that's also like a lesson that the viewer can learn is like your obsession over, you know, your obsession over the like material things can drive you to like your own destruction, you know, whereas you should focus on the things that make you good, like wanting to like stop evil and, you know, like caring about other people. It's a simple message, but you know, I think Tolkien was smart, like smartly wove that in with his character and his relationships with the others. Yeah. And there's numerous other like characters too that we just don't have time to like talk about in detail. But I mean, other key characters like Legolas, the elf, you know, he's a bowman. He has some great kills. He killed the elephant guy, which Gimli insisted only counted as one. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And also Gimli, of course, the dwarf with the axe, who famously tried to destroy the ring with his axe. And
we gotta destroy it.
You have my axe. I'm like, well, wait, didn't it just get destroyed when you tried to kill the ring?
He's a dwarf. He has like 7 axes.
He has multiple axes because he's a dwarf. But yeah, I mean, John Rhys Davies as Gimli and Orlando Bloom as Legolas. I mean, that's really good casting. Their characters aren't like super detailed, but definitely enjoyable characters. They kick a lot of orc butt.
Yeah, they do.
Boromir, another fascinating character. He's not in it as much. He's only in the first movie, but he kind of represents another character who's like desires the obsession and the corruption of the ring, but he ends up like turning good in the end and making a sacrifice. So yeah, Sean Bean, you know, dies in every movie or show he's ever in, you know, so it's fitting that he played Boromir. Yeah. So, and also like characters like Arwen, Elrond, they're all here. They all support the storytelling, but yeah, I feel like we went in depth on like the main characters pretty well. So
off topic, in Fellowship, there's this scene where they have Hugo Weaving's face, he's Elrond, just superimposed over like flames or something, and he's like in a trance. It's really quick. It's just made me laugh.
Oh yeah, that was like that's one of those like weird editing decisions that I saw.
The early 2000s, late 90s. You can't see it. He's like
Yeah.
almost having a seizure or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't
funny.
know. It was funny because I'm like, what are they trying to communicate?
I think it was like, so I can't remember the context of the scene. I wish I could, but I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. I know what you're talking about. It's like I think Arwen or Aragorn like having a dream or like reflecting on some theme of the movie. I can't remember what it was. But.
Like, we need to put Hugo Weaving tweaking.
Yeah, because Arwen had that internal battle of like, should she stay like an immortal elf or should she surrender that and like become one with Aragorn, you know, which I mean, for me, one of the very few criticisms of the Lord of the Rings, and I think it could be just a me problem, is like, I feel like a lot of stuff is like really vague and like not explained very well. Like a lot of the storytelling, like details. But
Tolkien.
and I think that's one of them, like Arwen, like, and Aragorn's relationship, I feel like is, I don't know if it's like underdeveloped or if it's just like it's a little confusing, like how it actually works, I guess. And maybe if you like read the books, it makes more sense, which Arwen's actually like barely even in the books. So maybe it doesn't make more sense, but
Tolkien said if you had questions, you need to read the Silmarillion.
yeah, well, I'm going by the
paraphrasing.
movies.
Did he actually say something like
I
that?
don't know.
Oh,
I just know that the Silmarillion gives a lot of context for things.
gotcha.
And like another instance of that was like the ending with Frodo leaving at the end of the Return of the King.
yeah,
like,
I was pretty much
feel like-
90% lost on that.
I feel like most people that watch that are like, I don't get it. Like,
Yep.
but like whatever. But the previous 3 hours and like 15 minutes that they watched, they really like. So they're like, you know what, whatever, nice ending. But for me, I remember like when I just rewatched this was like the first time where I was like, oh wait, I kind of think I get it.
We had to look something.
We had to. So apparently he like, because the wound he mentions this in like a couple scenes before, how he was like stabbed by the
Right, on
the Witch
Weathertop.
King, right? Yeah, and he mentioned like, oh, my wound still hurts, and then was kind of like vaguely foreshadowing like him leaving, and then he gets on this boat. So I guess you're just kind of left to assume like, oh, he's going to a place that can like leave Middle Earth and heal his wound.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of like what you're left with. And the hardcore lore people are probably like, oh yeah, well, I can explain this by this book and that and that. And like, yeah, but like, I kind of wish that the 3 movies would have like explained that a little bit better. I have never, to my credit though, or to my non-credit, I have never actually seen the extended edition of this, like the Return of the King. So maybe it's like brought up more in detail there. I don't know if y'all have seen it, but.
So I haven't seen it all the way through, but I've seen kind of like certain scenes that were cut from the theatrical release. And real briefly, I can say one of my favorite scenes is the killing of not Sauron, but
Saruman?
Saruman.
No, you've
Yeah.
never seen someone getting killed?
Well, his ending, I was like, this is very satisfying, because in the theatrical cut, we're
You don't
just
even
told
see him.
we don't even see him. We're just told by the tree guy.
Yeah.
He's in his tower. He's powerless. And it's like this scene, him being killed, falling, there's more closure to it.
It also shows, in his death scene, it shows the Palantir, the orb, falling into the water. So when Pippin finds it, you know, in the theatrical release, it's like, oh, I guess because you know Saruman has it from the previous movies.
Right.
But you don't know how really it got there because the towers don't get tipped or nothing. Or his tower doesn't get tipped or anything during the
Yeah.
siege in the previous
Yeah.
movie. So it's like, how did that get there? Well, in the extended version, you get a scene that shows exactly how it ended up in the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the Palantir?
Palantir.
Yeah, I think just there's like all these little fantasy like concepts and lore in the Lord of the Rings that the movie just has such a huge responsibility, like the 3 movies, of like explaining so many different things that I think a lot of times it's like you really have to pay attention.
Yeah.
Or you'll just miss something.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, there I feel like there are concepts that are a little bit vague or undefined, or maybe just like given a hand wavy explanation. But again, like, I don't think those are like movie ruiners. I mean, I would probably say that, I mean, for most of my life, I've said that the Lord of the Rings, probably like the third one in particular is like my favorite movie or movies of all time, you know? So like, I'm not saying like this ruins the movie for me, but yeah, I can like see somebody like being a little bit like frustrated about that. Like, oh, I don't know kind of what's going on with these certain plot points.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's, like, for example, when Aragorn decides to go into the mountain to see the ghost army and stuff, I think that whole introduction with the ghost army and them in the mountain is a little bit
It's a little out of nowhere.
It's a little bit out of nowhere, and it's also a little bit plot driven. Like, oh, I guess Aragorn is gonna go. Like, the last scene, he seemed kind of distant and kind of like confused and maybe a little bit scared of that ghost he saw in the cave or just in the crack of the mountain.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I guess he understands he should go in there. And like, even as they're walking through the mountains, like Legolas telling Gimli what this used to be and stuff, like, it felt a little bit straight from the book or like a little bit plot driven.
Yeah.
And a little like, I guess, explanation heavy, I guess.
And that's the troubling thing when you have to adapt like a massive mega novel, and like 3 of them on the big screen. And I think Peter Jackson and the editing team, the writing team had to like kind of make that decision. Like, yeah, we're going to briefly explain these things. We're going to briefly bring in not everything is going to be extremely well set up, but we're going to keep the heart of this movie on the characters that we've developed really well.
Yeah.
And, you know, just the excitement of the magic and the action sequences and just the like beautiful storytelling at the heart of it. So, you know, I think they had to like make some tough calls. Mm-hmm. But again, like, I don't think that for me personally, like, ruins it. Like, the older I get, the more like I think critically about movies and, you know, but I can't deny like growing up and even today, just like how I feel about these movies and just like how much they've impacted me, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not like going to be hard on the movie for those brief little frustrations.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah. So just some of like, to go over some of like the major themes of the movie, or the movies. So yeah, like there's this idea of good versus evil, which I feel like in a today fantasy movie or something is like everything seems more like gray. Like like Game of Thrones, for instance.
Very gray.
every character is like kind of bad. Like, you know, like no character is like undoubtedly like, wow, I'm going to root for this. I mean, there are characters that you really do root for and stuff, but yeah, it's not like so black and white as like good versus evil. And I feel like Lord of the Rings embraces good versus evil. Like, and I think it does allow for complex, you know, characters like Gollum, like we talked about earlier, or Boromir.
Or Faramir.
Or Faramir. You know, these characters that are conflicted. Even Aragorn, like,
Yeah.
should I stay or should I become who I'm supposed to be? You know, so there is that kind of conflict, but ultimately, like, I think it shows that there's roads turning towards good and there's roads turning toward evil. And the movie makes that pretty clear. If you're kind of caught in the middle, there's like no room to be caught in the middle, which I actually appreciate that. Like, I think that allows for more like focused storytelling. You know, and it doesn't seem like overly nihilistic, you know, like nothing has purpose or meaning, you know, it's everything just happens. You know, it's like, no, like there's the good guys and the bad guys and we can be happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even with the characters where you mentioned have these like conflicts, they very clearly have to make a choice. There's no riding a line or anything. Like with Faramir, he's like, he realized like, okay, I'll let you go, Frodo, because I recognize after some, you know, questionable decisions, he's like, I recognize that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And with Boromir too, makes a very similar decision to his brother, I guess, because they more involved storytelling, right? Where they're brothers and they both have the same kind of decision to make, and they both make the right ones.
Yeah.
Or like their dad, who just chooses to suck. You know, and part of me is like, do I think he's mentally ill, or do I think he's like, I don't know, just like accepting he's over, so he's trying to. It's just really, really funny stuff with that guy. But he chooses to be bad.
Yeah.
Despite advice from Gandalf or even from Pippin, you know, hey, your son's like breathing. He's like, I'm gonna pour oil on us and light us on fire.
Yeah. And then when he does see Faramir, like when he does realize it for himself that he's still alive, he's just to a point where I don't know if it's grief or if it's a bunch of things boiling inside of him that just drive him to decide he's gonna just kill himself and jump off the the highest point of Minas Tirith and just fall.
Denethor, what a character.
Yeah, which I think if there's anyone to kind of be a runner-up of showing just the tragic downfall of someone, I think it's him. Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe underneath Gollum.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we don't get as much time with him as we do with Gollum, but every decision he makes, like, at least I felt it. Like, every decision he makes, I felt just the sadness in it. Like, dude, like, no, like, you can choose to be better. You can choose to do this, but every choice he made just drove him deeper into a hole that he eventually just didn't want to get out of.
Yeah, that's good. And, you know, also there's this theme of like friendship, you know, fellowship. I mean, the first movie is called Fellowship of the Ring, right? Mm-hmm. It's these multiracial, like dwarf, human, elf, hobbit. Like, I guess, what is Gandalf human? Just a wizard?
I think wizards are...
Is wizard its own race? I don't know the lore. Somebody comment and tell us.
Well, so...
Or Jason.
The wizards, at least the original wizards, are a different race that come from the same place, I think, that Sauron came from before he was Sauron. It's all really vague, and Tolkien was vague on purpose.
Yeah.
But like, there's other continents on the planet, but they're also like other dimensions, I guess. Mm-hmm. And you sail to them. That's why the elves sail to the continent of everlasting life or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's kind of like Pirates of the Caribbean.
But yeah, kind of.
But way better than those.
But wizards come from the same place that a lot of super beings come from.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
So probably a different race, probably not.
Wizard lore.
There you have
Wizard lore. But yeah, I just think, this diverse group of companions and like how you can see the conflicts between them because especially early on, like Gimli and Legolas, I think, are butt heads. It's the classic dwarf versus elf rivalry. If you've ever done any reading or watching of fantasy, the dwarves and elves never get along. No different here. But you can also, what I like about it is like they're all like professionals and they agree like, okay, fine, we'll put our differences aside to work together. Doesn't mean I have to like you, you know, but like we're going to work together. But then at the end of the trilogy, like they grow to like each other. Like I will die side by side with a friend, you know. Yeah, they become friends. You know,
such a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, so that's what I appreciate about like the fellowship aspects of the movie.
I just like how well written the ensemble cast is, and how well they're able to pull people in and drop them, you know, because especially in the Two Towers, they all kind of split up a bunch. Yeah. And then they come back together, and it's just a really interesting weave. Yeah. Of their arcs, and it's just really a comment on the writing about how it doesn't feel like anyone's overshadowing another. Necessarily, right? No one seems like, obviously there are more important characters, but it doesn't really feel that way. You feel like everybody here is important, and has a purpose to serve, and that without a single one of them, everything kind of falls apart. Yeah. So I just really appreciate that about the story. Yeah. And the fellowship.
They're very interwoven.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And I think it's an incredibly complex web of characters going on here. Just thinking of like, oh, well, there's the Rohan people like Eowyn and Theoden Éomer, Carl Urban, who has like 3 lines in the movie.
So
He's
it is.
awesome.
So it is him. I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, is this the Doctor from Star Trek?
Yeah, I think has.
That's what you think of Carl Urban as, the Doctor from Star Trek?
Yes, that's what I think. I know. I don't know a lot of his stuff, but I know he's in that. I know he's in The Boys.
He's in Thor Ragnarok briefly.
That's right. He is in Thor Ragnarok.
He made the Dread remake.
Oh yes, that's right too. Okay.
He's in the Doom
Is he-
movie from 2002.
Yes,
Is he in
Rocket. Yes.
Thor? Oh, he plays the.
He plays the guard.
Of the
yeah.
gate.
Yeah, he has 2 M16s. Pretty funny.
Oh yeah. Anyway, yeah. There's and then there's like obviously there's the Fellowship at the center, but there's the like Galadriel and all the elf people. All the Gondor people. There's so many different characters, and I really like how the movie like weaves everybody together, and like most of these characters, like pretty much all of them, feel very meaningful to the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's really great writing. I mean, obviously from Tolkien, but even like the screenplay, adapting that. So, yeah. And yeah, just seeing the friendship with like Frodo and Sam, and then seeing like Merry and Pippin being inseparable, like and Aragorn respecting like and Gandalf and their relationship. You have the duo of Legolas and Gimli. There's a lot of like twos.
Yeah.
There's a lot of twos in there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also, like, there's some characters go through things, like, that rub against each other and, like, are kind of hard for them in their relationships. Like, one thing that I thought was pretty well done was the, like, Éowyn, like, having a big-time crush on Aragorn.
Yeah.
And, like, him just, like, coldly saying, I cannot give you what you seek,
Yeah.
And that was tough, But I don't know. I kind of liked how it was, like...
He did it in a very respectable fashion too. Like
Yeah.
the way he delivered it, the way he said it to her was like, the way it came across showed that he still respected her, but it also showed that he was, he's willing to tell the truth even if it's going to be hurtful to himself or to others, just because, you got to tell the truth.
Yeah.
I think they did a good job too of showing that the relationship was one-sided throughout the entire time they interact. Where, like, she clearly very like has a thing for him, but he's just like
bad, bro. She was down bad.
But he was just like, I'm just a dude with a sword.
Yeah.
But he already has his love, Arwen.
And they go over that. He like tells her because she's like, "What's that necklace you got there?" And he's like, "Where is she?" He's like, "She's sailing away to never be seen again."
So she was trying to capitalize.
She's like, so what you're saying is, I'll
have a
see
chance.
you tomorrow.
But she
I'll make my tent right here.
she technically ends up with Faramir,
Yeah,
which I like how if you watch the theatrical version, like
You don't know that.
You don't really notice that.
it's in the extended.
And in the extended version, it's like in there, but it's not like really set up that well. If you view the extended, it's like maybe one scene. So.
Do they show that more in the coronation? Is that where they kind of bring it full
Yeah,
circle?
they're. If you can notice, like they stand next to each other at the
Okay.
coronation.
Okay.
So, and like in the books, it's more fleshed out and everything. But
Cool. Cool.
anyway,
Happy endings for everyone. That's the
yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about this idea of like corruption and power too, like how Gollum seeks this power and like feeling he gets. Like even Bilbo experiences that, which to me, that was like, how did Bilbo like maintain like pretty decent control over time? But Gollum went bad. So I guess that's more of like an underlying
I don't think
character
Bilbo's
thing.
always wearing it. He doesn't keep it on him throughout.
So he just
a lot
kind
of
of
the time.
like keeps it in his pocket or,
His little belly pocket.
Yeah.
He pulls it out with his 2 fingers.
In the Fellowship, Frodo mentions that as of recently, he started changing. So it's possible he wasn't even holding it at all, like not even in his pocket for a lot of the time. How he managed to do that, I don't know if it's ever explained. I don't know an explanation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting. Like,
But it also took Gollum 500 years to like get that way too.
oh, true. It was a much longer time. Sure. And like, even Boromir, you know, having that kind of like drive for power, like saying, but I mean, his might have even been good intentions. Like we could use this to like destroy the enemies of Gondor.
Because that was his initial motive when they're in the, you know, gathered together.
And then I guess it has some sort of like magical like draw to it that corrupts you to evil, you know?
Yeah.
So like Boromir actually wouldn't have been able to use it the way that he intended to. And that's what something Gandalf was able to see, you know, and was wise enough to like say, I'm not going to carry this. I'm actually too powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a lowly hobbit who's got a good heart. I'm going to send him with it.
Well, also when you use it, Sauron just automatically knows where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
He can send his guys to go kill you.
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So like for the enemies of Gondor, I'm like, man, like, yeah, you're invisible to everyone but your enemies.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the fantasy elements that I think was explained pretty well. You know,
Yeah.
like,
I mean, it makes sense
like
that he doesn't,
practically using the ring was
like he doesn't know that. I
there's
don't
the
think.
classic scene of like in the bar where he's holding his hand up and like you could see the ring like fall on his finger.
Yeah.
But
I can just imagine Bilbo putting the ring on, you know, in the Fellowship movie, doing the party trick.
Yeah.
And I can just imagine, you know, he's running back to the home, and then Sauron's like, "Hey, you guys want to go crash a party?" I know where he's at right now.
I also like the way they visualize what it looks like for the wearer when they're because you know it's like, oh, it's invisible. Actually, it takes you to like a terrible, evil looking place.
Yeah.
It's really you're just in the same area, but it just looks all misty and
It's kind
windy
of like a wispy upside down in a way,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
from Stranger Things.
Yeah.
It's a good comparison.
yeah, and like, yeah, I think Peter Jackson just really has a good vision direction for like how he wanted those sequences to play out. Yeah, I mean, Peter Jackson has directed like, I don't know, like what, King Kong, a couple like random horror movies
I like
before
his
this,
King Kong.
and King Kong was after.
One of that was after. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's weird that Peter Jackson of all people was like the one that did these, but because you wouldn't think of like his resume outside of the Lord of the Rings, like, oh yeah, that's the guy that we're gonna get. But he does it, and like obviously, you know, paid off, right? But yeah, it, like this whole thing is, I mean, these are maybe like the most well directed movies you'll ever watch, just with how big of a task it is, how much of a like a vision you have to combine all of these numerous elements of the story, all these characters, all these fantasy things that the books present, and having to adapt them, and just like being able to visualize things. And it's not something that you really see every day from, you know, book to movie adaptations. And, you know, just to plug my boy Denis Villeneuve, I think did this really, really well with Dune, you know, and like I think a sign of like a well-directed movie in these cases, it's like, is there complicated sci-fi elements or complicated fantasy elements that the director's able to put on the screen, visualize them to make like sense to the point where you can like suspend your disbelief and be like, wow, that was really well presented. Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, the scenes with Gollum versus Smeagol, like I think really well directed. I mean, obviously, like the action, the war sequences, Helm's Deep is maybe one of the most iconic war sequences ever.
Epic.
Like, you know, and yeah, just what Peter Jackson was able to present to the screen, I think, visualizing Tolkien, you know, yeah, it's amazing. I think it's unmatched. Like, if you had to ask me, like, what's the best, like, all-time directed movie, I would probably say, like, well, maybe one of the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah. It shows. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I was just gonna say like the pacing. I know that's maybe a little bit more part of the editing.
That's more like the script, but I mean
the script is done by. I know there's other writers, but Peter Jackson also wrote.
yeah, he was a co-writer.
So it's just juggling that. Like when we think of like good pacing with like big casts, we think like maybe like Infinity War. I think these movies, at least the second two, put that one to shame.
What? You mean like Two Towers and Return of the King?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's what you meant.
Yeah, but the Two Towers and Return of the King kind of put what Infinity War did like to shame. I'm not saying Infinity War is bad or anything, but like you compare it to this, and it's like, wow, like there's a lot more room
Yeah.
to do things a little bit better.
Yeah, and even in Return of the King, the structure felt refreshing because it didn't feel like a typical third movie in a trilogy, end it all, big battle type structure. Because when the battle at Minas Tirith ends, like that's not the end of the movie. And so I like the way that it was paced out because it was refreshing. You know, it's like there's moments where you think you might know what happens or what is going to happen, but then it changes. And for me, it was refreshing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like the sheer like difficulty of putting this on the screen, I think deserves so much praise, you know? Like, how do you make the decision like, okay, well, Tolkien wrote a lot of songs that the characters sing.
Yeah.
Like, how do I incorporate these? Do I incorporate the scene with Tom Bombadil? Like, you know, how do we visualize Frodo, Sam, and Gollum walking through this sea of like corpses, like without being rated R, but also like still be terrifying to the audience? And like, how am I going to visualize the Shire and compare that to like Mordor, you know? The sequences like in the Mines of Moria, you know, there are so many like iconic set pieces that are so well realized on the screen.
Absolutely.
And it's just incredible what they're able to do. Like every single scene, sequence, location is just like unbelievable with like the set design, the costuming, you know, all of these elements like mixed together are so well realized. And obviously like you have to give credit to like the costume designer, the set designer, but all of that like falls under the direction of Peter Jackson and his vision. So, yeah.
Beautifully done.
Yeah.
And I think to tie back to what you briefly said about the Shire and Mordor, I think to open the trilogy in the Shire and to end it in the Shire as well, I think is really important for the story because it's showing you, and Mordor serves as like the perfect contrast because it's showing you where these heroes are coming from and what they're set to overcome. And then the fact that they get back to where they came from is just, I think, a beautiful contrast.
Yeah. Also, like something worth bringing up is the use of like effects, CGI and practical. And I think watching this the other day, is like watching The Return of the King the other day with y'all, like I noticed like, man, I mean, that still looks pretty good. Like I can tell, like, I can tell this was made like at least, you know, I could tell that this wasn't like, it doesn't maybe look as good as like the, you know, modern masterpieces of CGI, but it's still like, I can tell like for that time that would have looked really excellent. And like even today, like a lot of it still looks really good, you know, just all of the big shots like overlooking armies and like, I mean, obviously Gollum even today looks fantastic, you know, what they were able to do with the animation on him. So that's just like the CGI in particular. Was there any like moments that stood out to y'all in terms of like visual effects?
Bro, the hobbits themselves look really, really good the entire time.
Like how they're able to frame their height and everything.
Yes, like you don't... Whatever they did, or all the multiple things that they did to make it work, like you never feel like they swapped out Elijah Wood there for something CGI or someone who's shorter or whatever. It literally feels like that's just Elijah Wood.
Yeah.
Or that's just Elijah Wood and he's really short.
Yeah.
You know, and all the hobbits feel that way. They never feel out of place. Like it's like, oh, that looks weird.
Right.
Like it looks natural to me.
And they had to use like a lot of kid actors. They had to use really, really tall people, like especially for like Gandalf early on in Fellowship of the Ring. And kind of like we talked about in our Elf episode when we talked about Elf a couple episodes ago, like how they would build like different sizes of sets. Like the Shire had multi sets, one like really big one and one really small one. and how they were able, just like make all that seem as real as possible. And like some of it is movie magic, some of it is computer magic, but I mean,
to go into so one thing they did, I did some research on this stuff because, man, it was so cool. So one thing they did that they called big rigs was like they made essentially like a bigger costume for people to wear. So like wearing stilts and having longer arms and having basically just like a bigger person but made out of prosthetics and clothing and stuff. And so there's a scene in it's either the first or the second one where like all the hobbits are in a tavern and like a human guy walks by them.
Yeah.
And you see him like chest down, but that was one of those big rigs that someone was wearing.
Oh,
and it's really cool because just in the behind the scenes, the way they were able to make those seem full of life without it seeming like rigid was really cool. And yeah, that was just one example. They did a lot of really cool techniques with the hobbits and portraying them. They used a lot of forced perspective, which was really cool.
A lot of slick editing work that they had to do, and
they even replaced some faces too. Like they would use a body double, and then they would record, say, Frodo's same scene, but they would just record his face, and then they would composite that onto the other footage. And man, this is cool. You know?
I mean, it's no wonder like all three movies won the Oscar for like best visual effects. You know,
and it's no small part of the movie. I mean, that's the entire trilogy.
Yeah,
it's the hobbits interacting with normal sized people.
And that, I mean, but there's also just like these massive CGI set pieces that they had to create. You know, and I'm just thinking of like the volcano and Mountain Doom. Is that what it's called? Mountain Doom?
Yeah, Mountain Doom.
And just like the Nazgul, flying Nazgul look great.
Yeah.
You know, the eagles, you know, there's just a lot of great stuff. Or like the one scene that really stood out to me, like as being really well directed and visually great, was Frodo versus the spider. Shelob, I think. Oh man,
dude,
that was so tense of a scene. Like when he's walking and like you could see the spider like being really silent, crawling. That was amazing. Like
they held on that shot for so long too, and I was like, dude, this is adding so much tension. It's beautiful. Like,
dude, I hate spiders. Like I can't stand them. So every scene of that was like, I was like, ugh.
And seeing like Sam's fight versus it was like remarkably like well choreographed and I mean, and everything about this movie like took it to 11. Like they just, especially with visual storytelling, just 11 out of 10. Maxed it out and like didn't cut corners. Everything was great. It didn't seem like they took a scene off like, oh, we can chill in this scene because it's just people talking. Like, no, it all looks so great.
They put everything in for every second.
Every frame of painting.
Yeah.
And even when Sam was fighting the spider and he grabs onto her fangs and she's like pushing him up against the side of the cave wall and she's like trying to bite at him, but he's like holding on and it's jarring. That was really good.
Interacting like
the interaction.
A real actor with a CGI character like that must have been just a nightmare, but they got it done.
I'm curious how much was like a live action performance versus a CG double. But for a lot of it, if it was a mix up or like a mashup, then I think they sewed it together very seamlessly for most of it.
I think we even commented on that while we were watching Return of the King. Sean Astin was like CGI and in the same shot, like unedited.
He rolled down the back
landed
of the spider.
And rolled, and you could tell like, oh, wow, he went to a real person, but it looked really smooth. And I was like, wow, that's really nice.
Yeah.
But
I will say though, out of that whole scene, with the spider, when the one part that looks a bit cartoony to me is when Frodo is getting wrapped up in her web. Like his movement looks a little cartoony as of like how he's being moved around and flopped around in a sense and how
Yeah.
he's being twirled and stuff. Like it looked just a slight bit cartoony.
Yeah, it looked like you could tell that Frodo was like completely computer generated there.
Yeah.
They should have put Elijah Wood on a spit, spun around.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are parts where the illusion does break a little bit, but it's still like it's so incredible what they did. And
Yeah.
how like influential that was, especially in that era where we were kind of switching more towards a computer generated look for a lot of big budget movies. And yeah, I mean, at the time it was easily like the best looking stuff you would see in terms of CGI. So,
but what's cool though is they still understood. I think they still understood its place because a lot of the sets, like you said, Wesley, were off the recording. You said like they were miniatures, and
oh yeah,
and even with certain shots they did it in New Zealand, and they built certain sets in New Zealand, and I think they understood the tools that they had, and they knew when to use them, which I think is very key. Like you can have the tools, but if you're using a hammer to cut a piece of wood, like
it's not going to be a very clean cut.
And before they even started filming, they spent, I want to say, like, I don't know the exact amount of time, but a couple years maybe just preparing everything for it. Like building, I mean, obviously you do that with every movie. You build the set before you film, but like they had to do like, what is it? Weta Workshop, which is like I don't know.
Weta is an effects company.
Yeah, an effects company, but they, I guess, spent like years just working on costumes, sets, armor, like
that's cool.
Swords, like how like there's got to be like dozens or even hundreds of like unique like orc makeup. Like it's like prosthetic, and that's one of the things that I think The Hobbit lost, because I feel like they just resorted to like using CGI models for a lot of their orcish characters.
Yeah, and
it's like just watching that orc commander like dodge out of the way of the big rock and like looking at his face is like, he looks gross, but I can tell like that looks,
it's a living being.
Looks real almost, like so
he was so gross. Like I don't know I don't know what happened when he was made. Some infection got to him or something. Like his hand was all blown up too.
A face only a mother could love. And even then, that's probably.
I don't think those orcs have a mother.
I was gonna say that's what happens when you're born from dirt and mud.
Yeah, the
from like evil Saruman magic.
Yeah. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, and as far as like the craftsmanship of the movie, like I mean, the cinematography is great too. The landscapes that they had, the lighting of the different scenes.
So good.
Yeah, and just I mean, New Zealand's a great place to film. It's not like England. Like one of the actors says, like, if we made this in England, we wouldn't have the landscapes. It's just there's too much civilization here, for us to make a movie like this. Where New Zealand is largely like untapped, in terms of, just cutting down forests and putting, condos in. They're like, there's lots of nature out there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the cinematography is aided by the landscapes, the choice of sets. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great iconic shots in The Lord of the Rings that, sit with us to this day. Like the ring falling on his finger is one of those,
The camera following Gollum as he falls into the lava, like that's a beautiful shot too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gandalf facing off the Balrog.
Dude, if you want to talk about epic scenes, everything between Gandalf and the Balrog is just so good.
Man, love Gandalf. The scene where the shot where Aragorn looks back and says, "For Frodo." I mean, that's such a good shot.
Brings a tear to one's eye.
Yeah, I mean, we could go on and on for hours, but the score of the movie, Howard Shore.
The Howard Shore score.
He won 2 Oscars. He didn't win for The Two Towers because I guess they just wanted to give it to somebody else. I don't know how you don't pick this one to win, but I love scores like this. There's not like the blobs or like the experimental like percussion sounds and it's just like here's an orchestra. Here's an orchestra playing really great music. Like there was no like there was no messing around. You know, it felt just like a genuine, like, this is a classic movie score.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many different themes that are so well written to describe each character or each location. My favorite personal one is the orcs one where it's like bubble bum boom boom bum.
Yeah,
I really like that one because
so good.
I played the trombone in real life, and that's the trombones playing it.
Nice.
And it's like it's not in a usual like time signature, like it's not in a usual meter. It's like in 5 instead of 4, and you know there's heavy percussion beaten down. You know, but you also got like the nice little flute or like whatever it is doing the Hobbit theme at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then you got bum 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 bum, but like the heroic. I don't know if that's like Aragorn's theme or just like the Rohan man.
Yeah,
like,
I think it might be the Ride of Rohan.
The Riders of the Rohirrim.
Yeah. Something cool about the score. Like every time they open with the title card, I used to not like the music that was paired with the opening of every movie. You know, when we see Lord of the Rings, blah blah blah, because while it's very beautifully done, it has this unsettling, eerie feel to it. I don't know if you guys catch that, but like it sounds beautiful, but then it gets to a point where it sounds like, is everything okay in the story? Like, but I think it's playing into the fact that we are in a story that is revolved around this ring that can cause this corruption so easily, and that can just easily invite someone to turn to corruption, greed. So I thought that was like very cool. But at the same time, the score is very hopeful and impactful when it needs to be, or very dark and scary, or very intense when it needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some of the best music is for the villains.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you see their armies marching, like you mentioned, like with the orcs and stuff. But whenever they show Mordor or they show Sauron, all of me is just like, oh, the best pieces, or one of the best pieces, is when they come up on that I guess the lair of the Witch King.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all green and stuff. And I don't know if this makes sense, but the music sounds green to me. Like a sickly green.
Interesting. Okay.
Maybe it's
just great writing.
It's a little esoteric there, but
something about that scene. I don't know if you guys are thinking this, but it reminded me of The Wizard of Oz. Like the way,
like the Emerald Castle.
No, when they approached the witch's castle.
Oh.
And like you got the soldiers going, oh, yo.
Yeah.
Yo. Like it had, I wonder if they were intentionally like paying homage to another scene where lead characters are trying to stay hidden from a big castle. Because it gave me a lot of thoughts about that. Like it looked like there were some similarities.
Ozisms.
Yeah. Which I thought was interesting. I wonder if there was a tribute he wanted to make or something.
We should call it Peter Jackson, or maybe Mr. Shore.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So Howard Shore, we salute you for one of the most iconic movie scores we'll ever have. So many great things. It reminds me of like just my all-time favorite movie scores. With I'm just thinking like how many themes I can remember from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is like the Lord of the Rings is like right up there with like just in the iconic nature of but also just they're iconic for a reason because it's just really well written and orchestrated. And so hats off to you, my friend, Howard Shore. I don't know you personally, but I'm going to call you my friend anyway. So
we can be friends.
I mean, this movie,
Why can't we be
we talked a lot about it, and it's had a big impact on society, and it was like, inspired a lot of stuff that came after it, like, and just what it was able to do with visual effects, what it's able to do with storytelling, adaptations of movies or of books to movies. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a better one. And like we've mentioned briefly sometimes, like the Academy Award success, like not that matters that much, but it's cool when these great movies are recognized. And The Lord of the Rings trilogy, actually tallied this up, has a total of 17 Oscar wins.
Shoo.
Not nominations, wins. And the third one won 11 out of 11 of its Oscar nominations.
Wow.
So,
Were any of them Best Director?
the Fellowship of the Return of the King won Best Director and Best Picture.
That's good.
Also won Best Screenplay.
Oh, of course.
So it had those
I expect
three.
nothing less.
Had those like big like if you win director and screenplay, like you're pretty much gonna win Best Picture. But yeah, it won a slew of like technical awards too, like I mentioned earlier. And
Well deserved.
Can I add something to the technical stuff?
yeah, let's do it.
So at the time of this recording, I learned this today, which I thought was really cool. So there was a software that they used for this movie called Massive. That was the name of the software, Massive. Mm-hmm. And essentially it was an AI simulation to where they had all the CG characters, like a bunch of the orcs. Like this was used for a lot of the massive shots for like a bunch of the orcs and other people fighting.
Yeah.
So they had all these different characters and they were able to randomize their actions by giving it data based off of stunt coordinators and like the whole stunt team. And what's cool is that those individual characters also reacted to light and sound within the 3D environment or within the data that they gave it, something like that. I don't know, the most about this. I just learned this, but it's still so cool. And so essentially, when you see all these characters fighting in these wide shots, if they're the CG characters, they are basically just given this data and the software just runs its course. And so it's like pulling data and pulling its choices from what it's been given from the stunt team and everything else, which I thought was really cool because, that's a really smart way of doing it instead of going in and animating individual CG characters to be fighting. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, wow, this
is the late 90s.
Yeah, for the time period too, I think is really cool. Like super cool.
Yeah, they went all out for this. You could tell how much they loved this, like these books, and just wanted to make a really faithful and honoring adaptation. I mean, there are famously things that are not like excluded or elevated above what they were in the books, like Tom Bombadil, like I mentioned earlier, nowhere to be found.
I don't even know that guy.
Tom Bombadil he's in the first book, and what is he? Doesn't he like accompany the hobbits before they get to like Rivendell?
You're asking the wrong guy.
I can't remember.
Clearly not important.
He was very important. He was very important in the first book, at least. And like Arwen, like I mentioned earlier, was only in like a couple lines in the first book, and that was like it.
Interesting.
And one way they structure the books, like I particularly remember like Two Towers for whatever reason, reading that book. Mm-hmm. The whole like Helm's Deep sequence was just like one part of the book uninterrupted. They didn't go to any other scenes, and same thing like the part where Merry and Pippin are with the trees, tree beards, like that is like a huge, like a massive portion of the book. So, there are things that are cut out, that are shortened, that are extended. But yeah, it's more of like we're going to tell Frodo and Sam's story all at once. And then we're going to tell the, Aragorn Helm's Deep part all at once, So the movies did make the choice to like not tell the story that way, to like interweave it all chronologically. So anyway,
I think they did good about that.
Yeah, really well edited.
I mean, I guess
they were able to do that.
Referencing back to the Bombadil character, I guess the fact that we don't feel like we're missing anything in the Fellowship. Yeah. I'm not going to say he was unimportant, but the choice to not put him in there, I don't think hurts what we got.
You know that farmer that they run away from at the mushroom farm or whatever, or what is it? That farm at the beginning?
Yeah,
they're still like in the Shire technically.
Yeah, they're like stealing food.
In the book, they run from him at first, but then his name is Farmer Maggot,
Of course.
And but he's actually like a nice guy, and he like lets them in their house.
He's a nice maggot.
And there's just weird like scene of like all the hobbits like are taking a bath.
What?
Yeah, it's like, what is going, and they're like singing songs. I'm like, okay.
Is it like a communal bath, like how they used to have
In Rome?
in Rome?
I guess it's kind of similar to that. It's like, yeah, I don't know. The book was written in the 50s, you know, it's about fantasy, you know, it's like, you wouldn't really, I understand why Peter Jackson didn't put that in the movie.
All right, Elijah Shawn, get in the bath.
Like at the time, nobody would have thought anything like bad about that. But nowadays it's like, yeah, that's kind of weird.
Might have been translated.
So, you know,
Weird.
Yeah. Anyway.
Interesting.
I feel like that kind of falls in line with the identity of the hobbits, though, where they're just a really tight-knit community that kind of serves each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To that extent, but
Understandable why it was not included in the final edit of the movie.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. And since The Lord of the Rings has come out, we've had other movies like in that world. Mm-hmm. We've had the 3 Hobbit movies, which have been ruthlessly criticized. Mm-hmm. And then also a movie we went to see a few weeks ago, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, which the movie was pretty much made to like maintain
property
ownership of it. So, but it was a pretty decent film. So, you know, it's not a perfect movie by any means, but
the
it was better than the Hobbit movies, I think.
The narration's done by Eowyn.
It is.
Like the same actress.
Yes, Miranda Otto.
That's cool.
Yeah. So,
who is a shield maiden. They don't really talk about it in the movies as much.
Dude, that makes everything...
It brings
it full circle.
Rewatching the Lord of the Rings, particularly because she doesn't show up until the Two Towers, made me appreciate the War of Rohirrim a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I'd forgotten... And part of it, you know, it's not really in the movies that much, but I'd kind of forgotten about that part.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit more appreciation for the characters in the War of the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
Dude, that even makes me think, you know, when she had the shield when she was fighting the Witch King?
Yeah.
And the Witch King basically like swung his weapon around and shattered the shield. Dude, I wonder if they were thinking of that when in the War of Rohirrim, when Hera's shield maiden
gives her the
shield and mentions that, you know, cracks shows
like they're well used, but they're not broken. They're
well used or something. I wonder if they wanted to bring something that might be not nitpicky, but that might be diving deep about it. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of parallels, and like because that was Rohan, you know, it was the same place, so it kind of, I think, foreshadowed like Eowyn's character.
Yeah.
One thing I thought, which is I guess a little funny, is like the War of the Rohirrim takes place 1,000 years before the events of this movie, or of the original trilogy. Not Star Wars.
Is that what you're about to say?
When I say original trilogy, I think of Star Wars. The original Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
But the shots of the capital, I guess, of Rohan, you know, the place looks the exact same 1,000 years later.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the War of the Rohirrim kind of does it a disservice. I'm like, wow, you guys haven't done anything.
I think they're just trying to honor.
I know.
Yeah.
I just, it's like it's a non-issue. Like, I don't care, but I just think it's funny. It's like, wow, you guys haven't done anything, huh?
Yeah.
Worst movie ever. Ruins the movie. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's worth bringing up the Hobbit trilogy a little bit. I don't know, but
I haven't seen it.
Maybe in another episode.
Yeah, have you guys not seen it?
No, I've seen the full trilogy.
I've intentionally not watched it.
I think I can see some of the setbacks in them.
Yeah.
But especially the Battle of the Five Armies.
Yeah, the third one really
such a fun movie. And even the Desolation of Smaug. I think Smaug is a great character.
Wait, you think the third one's your favorite? Is that what you said?
No, I'm just saying like the Battle of the Five Armies, the third Hobbit.
Oh, like specifically the scene.
No, just that's the name of it.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So the third Hobbit movie, super fun. Like just a really fun visual spectacle.
Yeah.
And in terms of like characters, like Smaug, he's not the only character I like from that trilogy, but Smaug is a really great character. when he's introduced in this, mainly in the second movie.
Yeah.
I think he's hinted at in the first one, but dude, Benedict Cumberbatch brings his A game for Smaug.
Yeah.
But maybe we can talk about that maybe in another day.
I've never seen them because I've just always heard this, like, it's a really small book and they stretch it into 3 movies.
It's shorter than any of the Lord of the Rings books, but it has 3 movies dedicated to it.
Yeah.
I understand.
And
that.
the idea of that is like, well, it sounds like you're just kind of bloating stuff in.
Yeah, that was, I guess, my main thought is, like, I feel like this is just so bloated. Like, if you know, I think if I watched it today, I'd probably be even more critical on it than I was as a kid. But I do remember really liking the first Hobbit movie. Like, that one I really, really liked.
Journey.
I think it has a lot of great, like, individual scenes in it. I'd have to go back and rewatch it to see how it works as a whole. But
Yeah. I think Martin Freeman, right, who plays Bilbo?
yeah, great casting.
Yeah, great casting. Yeah. Adds a lot to Bilbo since we already know him from Lord of the Rings.
The intro scene with, like, the dwarves coming in felt like a lot like those opening chapters of the book too, and I really appreciated that.
That's cool.
So, and there's also the Amazon show, The Rings of Power, which I have not seen.
Nah, that I've
Neither
definitely
have
stayed
I.
away from.
But I have heard overwhelmingly negative reviews on it. So
Yeah.
like, just like how it doesn't have the same spirit that Tolkien had. That it, you know, it feels like boring and like there's not a lot of life in it. That's the kind of stuff I've heard, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen it, so
I haven't seen it.
I don't have
either.
Amazon because I'm cheap.
Really?
So anyway, well, is there any final thoughts before we sign out?
Do we want to give our ratings?
Yeah, I need Asher's word.
What is Asher's
yeah.
word out of 10?
Do you have
So
do
you
you have
mean- you
3
mean-
words, or do you have a
No.
single word for the entire trilogy?
So I had a word originally for the Return of the King when we watched it, but I think I can apply it to the whole trilogy. And that word is relentless out of 10.
Relentless out of
And
10.
that is because
It doesn't relent.
it doesn't relent, literally. Like, everything the characters go through, it's like dangerous situation after dangerous situation. And just when you think maybe they have a little bit of time before the next thing, it's like, no, like, we got more for you, you know, especially when, for example, like when Frodo gets stung by Shelob the spider, like, they even draw that out a little bit. Just when you think she's about to attack, like, nah. And then stab. And it's like, okay, I thought we were getting somewhere. Like, I thought Frodo was gonna get somewhere past the spider, but no, he's got to deal with this now. And so I think there's something really cool about the way they just continue to introduce situations to the characters that force them to just keep going. And it didn't relent. And on the flip side, the characters' perseverance, like, they didn't relent either. You know, every time they were faced with these situations, they're like, we have to keep going. Like, we have no other choice. Like, we have to stay strong. Even like in Return of the King, when they were guarding one of the gates at Minas Tirith, like, Gandalf was like, no matter what comes through that gate, stand your ground. And then the big, you know, trolls bust through. And then you see how Gandalf's face is like, oh, I wasn't expecting those things. But yeah, like, just relentless on both sides. The introduction of the dangerous situations just didn't relent until everything was resolved. And then the way the heroes responded, you know, their optimism, their perseverance, their hope didn't relent either. So relentless out of 10.
I like that. I like your choice.
Thank you.
For me,
What you got?
the trilogy as a whole, I'd give it a 9.5. 9.5 out of 10.
Nice.
The individual films, I think as they go on, they definitely get better, and I think that's kind of the consensus, maybe, for most folks.
I think a lot of people think 1 and 3 and 2 is, like, not quite as good. I think that's kind of what I've seen the most from.
Honestly, I would disagree. I think 1 is the weakest, if you can call any of these weaker. And I think 2 and 3 are really close. I think 3 is a lot better, or maybe it's just because it's the conclusion, so there's a lot of satisfaction.
Yeah.
But I like 2 a lot because it ends on a more positive note because the first one ends is like, Boromir just died. Frodo and Samwise are off on their own. What are we going to go next? At the end of the second film, they just defeat Saruman's army at Helm's Deep. And they also repelled an attack, I think, somewhere in Gondor or something. Maybe I'm misremembering something. Anyways, it ends on a positive note. But with like an air of like unfinished business, right? It's like they've won, but they haven't won kind of deal. My point being, I think the movies get better as they go. I think the first one, if I have any issues with anything, I do think the first one is like you take a second to get to the actual Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make the first third of the movie bad or anything. I just think the best parts of the movie are definitely after the Fellowship gets together, though. Not to diminish, Bilbo and seeing the Shire. I think all that's really important. I just think my satisfaction goes way up the moment we have Legolas and Gimli and Gandalf and
Aragorn.
Yeah, and like the scenes in is it Moria? The
mines.
Yeah, the mines of Moria.
Mines of Moria.
Like that's probably one of the best set pieces in the entire trilogy.
Oh yeah.
So just this idea that they get progressively better for me. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10. Love these movies.
Nice.
Probably hot take or maybe not so hot take. Probably the best trilogy through and through that we have to date. I'm not going to, I think other trilogies, they have their weaknesses. This doesn't really have weaknesses. It has things I can complain about, I guess, but no weaknesses.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great. For me, I mean, it's hard to like, in good conscience, not give it like 10 out of 10. Just like, if I'm going to say these are like maybe my favorite movies ever, like, I mean, I guess I did raise some criticisms a little bit earlier, but I don't know. I'm still going 10 out of 10. Nice. It's my number, nobody else's number. You can't tell me what to do.
Wesley gives it a double thumbs up.
So, yeah. Well, cool,
nice. Guys. So, can I pop my question now?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
Pop quiz.
No, I will not marry you.
Man stole my joke from earlier. He stole my joke that I told before.
Everyone listening has no context to that joke. We'll leave it that way. Okay, so here's the question. You're going on a long journey, and you can only choose one character from the Lord of the Rings universe to go with you. Who would you choose, and why?
Do you want to go first? Or do I want to go first?
I'm thinking.
Either of you can go first.
I have my answer, so I guess I'll go first.
You go for it.
Bro, it's gotta be my boy Aragorn, bro. It's gotta be my boy Aragorn. I literally changed that the last second. I was gonna say Gandalf, but then I was like, wait a second. Aragorn is an OG. I think every character is probably a good pick, but I feel like Aragorn, he would fight until he couldn't fight no more, and then he would fight some more. And also, he just doesn't lose. And even when he kind of loses, it's only because
he still wins.
You think he lost, but he didn't actually lose.
Because he's got a ghost army just that's going to come out of nowhere.
Well, that's gone.
Oh, well.
They fulfilled their contract.
Yeah, true. Sorry, my bad.
Is this pre or post ghost army?
I didn't think about that.
Hey, we're only talking about the character themselves. It's Aragorn. Nice. I would take Aragorn with me. He would fight orcs, fight Nazgul.
Yeah.
If he could, he would climb up that tower and stab Sauron in his stupid eye.
Oh, yeah, true.
Nice.
So what exactly was the wording of the question?
So,
like if you
so you're going on a long journey, and you can only take one Lord of the Rings character with you. Who would you choose, and why?
One? Oh.
I know, that's the tough part.
Because I want to say Merry and Pippin because they're fun.
Well, they're like half of people, right? So you can, if you stack them, they're one.
Whoa. Hobbit
bad.
racism.
Hey, they
Hobbit
make
racism.
up for their size in their feet.
Okay. True. Exactly.
In their feet.
They have humongous feet.
Man, that's a tough one. Long journey. Asher, do you have your answer? Well, I think.
Yeah, I can say my answer.
Yeah.
So I was debating between Sam and Aragorn, but I think I'm gonna go with Aragorn because
That's right. That's my boy.
because just his qualities are so admirable, and he seems like someone who would be a great mentor, you know, because you're going to go on a long journey with someone, you're going to get to know them. And so, you know, I think I can learn a lot from Aragorn and like his character. So I'd call up Aragorn and be like, hey dude, road trip, let's do it.
We gotta destroy the One Ring, Aragorn, again. And I'm picking you to carry me all the way to the mountain.
He's like, I think you got the wrong guy. I think that's Sam.
You're strong.
Oh man, that's a good question.
You could just call it a day and say Gandalf. That way you all can just ride eagles all the way to the journey.
I could.
Wesley's answer is the Fellowship. He chooses the Fellowship as a character.
I don't know. Maybe like I feel like Gimli's a funny guy. Like
Gimli?
You want some humor on your trip.
like I would have fun. Like,
yeah.
Like I don't know. I mean, Aragorn seems like he's just like we would have serious deep talks all the time, which is fine. But like I want to laugh. Like you know.
I hear you.
So I mean, I'm trying to think like the funniest character on his own. I don't know. I feel like I'd vibe with Gimli. I don't know.
There you go. Nice.
We could chill.
Yeah. I like it.
But you know, whatever.
What about Frodo? Would any of you guys take Frodo?
No.
No?
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I just
He wouldn't be in my top 3 or top 5 choices.
In fact, if I couldn't include him in the Fellowship.
oh no.
I like Frodo, but it's true. I don't know if I'd take him.
Yeah.
His best quality is that he's resistant to the ring. And if I'm the one carrying it, well, you're no use to me, Frodo.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like Sam would like do all the cooking. I wouldn't have to worry about that.
He'd bring the snacks. He'd bring the good snacks too.
Yeah, the lembas bread. He'd bring enough for the journey home.
Yeah, he would.
So
Sam, if you're hungry. Aragorn, if you're trying to get it done quick and efficient and learn something. Gimli, if you want to have fun.
Or if like you're looking for an eligible bachelorette, you could go with like Eowyn.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that angle.
True.
I mean, technically she did end up with Faramir, but
The thing is like I'm carrying a ring that makes me evil. Do I want her to see that side
Oh,
of me?
well,
Like,
this...
no, you're not.
The
not
journey
in this
doesn't
exercise.
have to revolve around the ring. It's just a journey in
it's
general.
just a journey in general.
Yeah.
I think still Aragorn's the
So
answer.
everyone, nice.
Well, Asher, where can people find us?
All right. On Instagram,
In your homes.
No. That's what you think.
in your earbuds, in your speakers. Blast this everywhere from
All
the
of your
rooftops.
technology. I'm in it.
So, real quickly, Instagram is @On the Slate Podcast. On YouTube, just type in On the Slate Podcast. Email if you want to reach out to us. It's going to be onthe_slate_pod@gmail.com. And we are on Spotify and Apple. And of course, all of these links are in our show notes.
Perfect. We also do YouTube Shorts as well as the podcast,
Yes,
or also
sir.
Instagram Reels.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just check those out as well. And I think that'll do it for the On the Slate Movie Podcast,
Yes, sir.
episode 7.
We tackled a whole trilogy.
We did,
Yeah,
and
we
this
did.
is going to be our longest podcast ever, which is amazing.
So
Thank
if
you.
you're still listening, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for tuning in. And yeah, this has been the On the Slate podcast. I'm Wesley.
I'm Jason.
I'm
You're
Asher. I never go second. I'm Asher. We'll just keep going.
And I'm also Jason again.
Everybody have a great January and God bless.